don't want your future!
Please. We need you to hope again.
That is how you make fucking superhero fucking movie, motherfuckers. Fucking X-Men Days of Future Past. Holy smokes. Days of Future Past is the 7th X-Men movie, came out in 2014. You know it's a good sign when my note is like plus. X-Men Days of Future Past is my favorite non-Dark Knight trilogy superhero movie, and my second favorite movie of 2014, and the best X-Men movie, and it's the movie that made me like X-Men, and that's why I'm so excited for X-Men Apocalypse. Am I also really worried? Well, yeah, because let's face it, when's the last time I wasn't disappointed on my channel? In Days of Future Past, you got Sentinels that are just coming and killing all the X-Men, and Xavier's like, well, shit. They have to send Wolverine back in time to make sure the Sentinels were never created, or they're all just going to be wiped out. Very, very depressing movie. This movie's such a perfect melding of the old and new cast, and really, if this were the last X-Men movie, like, if they stopped after this one, it would have been such, like, a great way to end it. Because it feels like a series finale. For when you have more than like a trilogy of movies, it starts to feel like a series. It's kind of what Marvel's doing. And you know how everybody says that the end credits sequence after Iron Man, where Nick Fury first walks off, is their favorite end credit sequence? My favorite end credit sequence is after the Wolverine, because it sets up for Days of Future Past. And, like, it's just Wolverine and, you know, Xavier being alive again, and they're playing this, like, really good music, and it's just, like, I think the whole point of the X-Men movies was always the relationship between Wolverine and Professor X. So, you know, Charles is, like, mentoring Wolverine and making him into, like, a better person, you know, getting him to, like, connect with other people so he's not just out there on his own anymore. And then it comes back full circle when he has to do it for Xavier again. It's so good! I really like the opening sequence because they really well established that these Sentinels are just overpowering the X-Men, and they are better than everyone in every way. And it always makes for good storytelling when you have an enemy that is stronger than you and you need to overcome them in a different way. And when they're like stabbing at the mutants and then Blink throws a portal and they're like, the knives come through the portal, so you see like symmetrical shots in the movie going like that. It looks so good. Now, this is my first X-Men movie that I'm reviewing, but just understand that Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, Patrick Stewart as Professor X, Ian McKellen as Magneto, James McAvoy as young Patrick Stewart, and Michael Fassbender as young Magneto are all, like, flawless casting choices. And everybody gushes about the Quicksilver scene, and even now that I know how they did it, you know, they took cameras and they shot all the stuff going up, and they shot that in super slow motion, and then they used CGI to put Quicksilver into it. Even now that I know how they did that, I'm still really impressed. It's a great scene. I like how even though Wolverine is clearly a good guy, he's still an anti-hero. Like, deep down, Wolverine's still a dick. And I love that. And he's such a badass! And then when they're on the plane, and you know, Magneto's like shaking everything around, and Wolverine's just like, wow, so you were always an asshole. And he's smoking a cigar, and he's just like, you want to pick all that shit up? It's funny, and it is just so Wolverine. If I have to look for flaws in this movie, you know, the one thing that stood out was, you know, they have to, like, keep Mystique's DNA from getting into the hands of Trask, and knowing that, Magneto still shoots her in the leg, but by the way, which was awesome, when the gun gets knocked out of his hand, but he still fires it because he's Magneto, so it's boom, and then he curbs the bullet. This movie does such a good job of integrating all the X-Men's powers into the story and doing it in, like, new ways. But even in the movie, they acknowledge that, and she's like, yeah, whose fault is that? And it's like, my fault, I wasn't dumbass, sorry. It's like, I can't even hold it against you because your characters had dialogue about it. And then Magneto's, like, pulling her towards him by the bullet. That was, dude, you're a dick. You're like an evil dick. You're not like a cool, fun dick like Wolverine. And it really makes Magneto seem evil for a second with like this friend, like this mutant, this person that's on his side, even in his like little personal crusade that he's got against humans, against another mutant that's like his close friend. He's willing to like cause that much pain to. It is in character. And then she escapes and they go down into Cerebro for the first time in like a long time. And he's like blowing the dust off it and they're playing this music. That wouldn't matter if this was the first movie, but the fact that we have 6 X-Men movies of history behind this makes that moment more impactful. Something else I noticed is that when Mystique is like trying to kill Trask and she's like flipping around the table, Trask, Peter Dinklage, who was good by the way, that's the kind of like quick scene in close quarters that would be really, really easy to just fall into shaky cam. but it's really smoothly shot. The movie's also a very depressing movie. It's like knowing what will happen if we fail, like it's just literally the end, the apocalypse, everybody dies, it's over. And the fact that they keep like failing and failing and failing is like, we're supposed to get Mystique, oh no, it's happening anyway, and you're just like, it'd be so easy to get depressed and give up as these characters. And when Wolverine tries to convince Xavier, is like, come on, we still have a chance, and Xavier's like, you don't believe that. The entire point of the movie is to like have hope in dire situations and to not give up, which sounds really like liberal and dumb, but when executed in like an action movie like this where people's lives are on the line, it's very effective. Especially with the music. This movie's got a kick-ass soundtrack, by the way. Did I mention James McAvoy's good in this movie? Even when he's all like drugged up in the beginning, he's still like making jokes. I really buy James McAvoy as a young Patrick Stewart because, you know, he's less experienced, but he's still like really wise, and you can see like how he would turn into Patrick Stewart one day. He's still very flawed at this point, but he's still got like the raging intellect. It also shows just like how strong he can be when he needs to, and when he's like about to reach for the drug again, and he just like puts it down just like that. It's like, that guy just broke a drug addiction in like 30 seconds. All he needed was someone to slap the depression out of him and get him back on course. And when he is like thinking clearly, he's capable of a lot. And Wolverine's just like doing his best to get this guy back on his feet, and he's like, look into my memories, like, look for your future, look at all the good that comes of you. And he just sees all the shit that happened to Wolverine. He's like, you poor man. He's like, look past my future, look for yours. And then you get like the best scene in the whole movie where Xavier looking into Wolverine's consciousness, which is trapped in this timeline but is also connected to the future. And old Xavier detecting that presence and reading Wolverine's mind, and they're talking to each other through Wolverine through time. That is so cool. If I may nitpick again, so you know when Magneto's like pulling all the rails off the tracks, which looks really cool by the way, and he like pulls himself onto the train by grabbing the metal. Again, nice to see them come up with new ways for them to use their powers. One thing that doesn't make sense is when he's like splitting all the I-beams into little pieces and he's like sliding them into the Sentinels to get controls. Like, sure, you now have metal to grab onto to be able to move the Sentinels, but can you still like activate them? Like, is he going into, like, the circuits, and he's, like, moving the ions to, like, control them remotely with machine power rather than just movement? Like, I don't know about that. But if he is, man, he's got a lot of focus. But I think that's just an oversight on the part of the movie. And then when Charles finds Mystique at the airport, and he's, like, talking through other people to reach her, I have to try really hard to not tear up at that scene. That's a really good scene. I also like the fact that like Charles is like super powerful, like OP characters, like mind controls everybody and can read everyone's minds. And Magneto's like super OP with like metal's in basically everything. So you're giving Magneto a lot of power, but also Charles can control Magneto's mind and stop him from doing anything, so that's like completely negates his power. But Magneto has a counter to that by wearing his little helmet, and you're like, I can't read his mind. So it's like a strategy game. It's like StarCraft almost. You have like counters for everything. And when he pulls the helmet out of the vault, and it just like flies into his hand. You hear that little sound. It's like, it's like, oh no, Magneto's gonna tear shit up. And it comes back to the future, and you see the Sentinels coming, and every future scene is like so good. I almost wish they would have spent more time in the future, but I don't want to cut out anything from the past, so my response would just be make the movie longer. Because I just want to see more of Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen doing stuff. But I mean, to be fair, they had their 3 movies. It's time for the new guys to shine. And when the Sentinels get there, even now that they have Magneto and Storm's help, the Sentinels just completely overpower him. And he just like blows up the ship, and then like he gets hit in the side with his little thing, and he just stops all the metal, and it's like Matrix. And the sound effects he's making at Magneto's cool. I realize that a lot of this review is just me like mocking what happens with my hand gestures and just saying, isn't that cool? And like explaining something. That's a sign of a good movie. You know how critical I am. And you see Magneto's eyes just widen as he just starts like walking backwards and he's like, oh shit. And you see him just piling all the metal on the door. It's like, that is just such a like, this is our last chance. This is our final stand kind of scenario action. And that made me tear up. I'm like, oh no, the X-Men are gonna die. I really like Blink too. She's throwing her little pink portals back and forth. And then Xavier and Magneto are like, all those years wasted fighting each other, Charles. Do have a precious few of them back. I'm usually full on crying by this point. And Mystique's about to kill Dinklage, and then Xavier catches her, and she's like, get out of my head, Charles! And he's like, Raven, please don't make us the enemy today. And she's like, look around you, we already are. not all of us. All you've done so far is save the lives of these men. John Ottman and his score. The music does such a good job of conveying and emphasizing the emotional punch that these scenes have. And Xavier's like, I've been trying to control you my whole life, and you're right, that was wrong, and I'm sorry. Everything that happens now is in your hands. And he just places all of his faith and trust in Raven. And Xavier just, like, lets go. And it's such a good moment. If I may have one more nitpick, and it involves Magneto, they're all with him for some reason, but I do profess that he's a really good character. It's when he's like, if you let them have me, I'm as good as dead, Charles. And he's like, I know. And then he just flies off. It's like, what? Okay, but what was the point of that line? That didn't make any sense, but like, things like that aside, I am hard-pressed to find anything really wrong with this movie. X-Men Days of Future Past is the standard modern-day comic book movies should be held to. The action is great. All the acting and performances are great across the board. The music is so good! And it does something new with its franchise. I'm so happy I get to give a high score for once. X-Men Days of Future Past gets a 9.5! Now everybody, go see Apocalypse. It's gonna be awesome. Please, please don't see Allison Through the Looking Glass 2. Please, just see X-Men first, okay? Come on, don't let Alice in Wonderland beat X-Men Apocalypse at the box office, alright?